I sat at my kitchen table on Boxing Day morning, staring at the text message my wife Linda had sent me the night before. The kids think it would be better if you didn't come to the cottage for New Year's. You've been so opinionated lately, and everyone just wants peace. Opinionated. That was the word she'd chosen. Not thoughtful, not experienced. Opinionated. We'd been married for 37 years. I'd raised 3 children with this woman. I'd built a career as a civil engineer, worked on projects across Alberta and British Columbia, retired with a decent pension. And now, at 63 years old, I was apparently too opinionated to spend New Year's Eve with my own family at the cottage I'd helped pay for. I texted back, "What do you mean, don't come?" The response came quickly. "James, you know what I mean. At Christmas dinner, you went on and on about the municipal planning issues. At Thanksgiving, you corrected Michael about his marketing strategy. The kids feel like you're always lecturing them." Michael was my youngest son, 28 years old, working at a tech startup in Vancouver. My daughter Sarah was 31, a nurse in Calgary, and my oldest, Daniel, was 34, an accountant in Edmonton. Good kids, smart kids, but somewhere along the way, they'd stopped seeing me as someone who had anything valuable to contribute. I thought about Christmas dinner. Yes, I'd mentioned some concerns about Calgary's infrastructure planning. I'd worked in municipal engineering for 30 years. I'd seen what happened when cities grew too fast without proper planning. But apparently, sharing that knowledge made me difficult to be around. "So I'm uninvited?" I typed. "It's just for this one time. Give everyone some space. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." I set the phone down and looked around my kitchen in our house in Airdrie. Linda had already left for her sister's place in Canmore. She'd be driving up to the Invermere cottage from there. The kids would all meet there, and I would be here, alone, for New Year's Eve. The thing is, I didn't think I was being difficult. I thought I was being engaged. I thought I was sharing experience. For the past year, since I'd retired, I'd been trying to stay involved in my children's lives, trying to help, trying to contribute. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe they didn't want my help anymore. I spent Boxing Day cleaning the garage. It gave me something to do with my hands while I processed the rejection. That's when I found my old engineering notebooks from the late 90s. I'd been working on traffic flow optimization back then, before the algorithms got sophisticated, before machine learning was even a common term. I flipped through the notebooks that evening. The formulas were still sound. The principles were still valid. I'd been ahead of my time with some of these ideas, but the technology hadn't existed to implement them properly. The computational power hadn't been there. But it was now. I spent the next few days reading, not just my old notebooks, but current research. I still had access to some engineering journals through my professional association. I learned about modern traffic management systems, about smart city initiatives, about the intersection of urban planning and artificial intelligence. And I had an idea. New Year's Eve arrived. I was alone in my house while my family celebrated at the cottage. I didn't call them at midnight. I didn't send a text. Instead, I opened my laptop and started working. I'm not a software developer. I'm a civil engineer. But I understood systems. I understood flow dynamics. I understood the principles of efficient network design. What I didn't know, I could learn. I spent January learning Python. I watched YouTube videos. I took online courses. I worked through tutorials. Linda came home from the cottage on January 2nd and found me at the computer. "Still upset about New Year's?" she asked. "Not upset," I said. "Busy." She looked at my screen, saw lines of code, and shook her head. "James, what are you doing?" "Learning. You're retired. You're supposed to be relaxing." "This is relaxing," I said. And oddly enough, it was. For the first time in months, I felt like I had a purpose. I felt like I was building something. She didn't understand. But then again, she hadn't understood a lot of things lately. February came. The kids called occasionally, but the conversations were surface level. "How's the weather? How's your health?" Generic questions that required generic answers. Nobody asked what I was working on. Nobody seemed curious about how I was spending my time. That was fine. I didn't need them to be curious. I was curious enough for all of us. By March, I had a prototype. It was rough, rudimentary, but it worked. I'd created a traffic flow optimization system that used real-time data to predict and prevent congestion before it formed. It wasn't just reactive like existing systems. It was predictive. It learned patterns. It anticipated problems. I tested it using publicly available traffic data from Calgary. The results were remarkable. In my simulations, I could reduce average commute times by 17%. I could decrease fuel consumption. I could lower emissions. I knew I needed help. I wasn't naive enough to think I could commercialize this on my own. So I reached out to someone from my old professional network, Robert Fitzgerald, a former colleague who'd transitioned into the private sector. He'd started a consulting firm that worked with municipalities on infrastructure projects. We met for coffee at a Tim Hortons in Calgary on a Tuesday morning in late March. "James," he said, shaking my hand. "It's been what, 5 years?" "6," I said, "since the Calgary LRT extension project." We caught up for a few minutes. Then I showed him my laptop. "I've been working on something," I said. "Traffic optimization using predictive algorithms." He looked skeptical at first, but as I walked him through the system, as I showed him the data, as I demonstrated the results, his expression changed. "James," he said slowly, "do you understand what you have here? A traffic management system." "No." He leaned back. "You have a solution to one of the biggest problems facing growing cities. You have something that could save millions of dollars in lost productivity, reduce carbon emissions, improve quality of life." I hadn't thought about it in quite those terms. I'd just been solving a problem, applying engineering principles in a new way. "I need to show this to someone," Robert said. "I have contacts at the city, and I know some people in the private sector who would be very interested in this." "I'm not looking to start a company," I said quickly. "I'm 63 years old. I just thought it was interesting." "James." He looked at me seriously. "This is more than interesting. This could be transformational. Let me make some calls." I went home that day feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Validated. Like maybe I wasn't just an opinionated old man after all. Like maybe my experience and knowledge still had value. But I didn't tell Linda. I didn't tell the kids. Some part of me wanted to see where this went before I said anything. Some part of me was tired of being dismissed. April passed. Robert introduced me to a few people. Engineers, city planners, a couple of entrepreneurs. Everyone had the same reaction. "This is impressive. This is valuable. This could work." In May, Robert connected me with a company called Urban Flow Technologies. They specialized in smart city solutions. Their CEO, Patricia Liu, flew in from Toronto to meet with me. We met at my house. Linda was visiting Sarah in Calgary. I had the place to myself. Patricia was in her early 40s, sharp, direct. She spent 2 hours examining my system, asking questions, testing scenarios. Finally, she sat back. "Mr. Morrison, I'm prepared to make you an offer." "An offer?" "We want to license your system, develop it further, implement it in mid-sized cities as a pilot program. If it works the way I think it will, we can scale nationally, internationally." "I'm listening," I said. She named a figure. Licensing fee plus royalties. The licensing fee alone was more than I'd made in any single year of my engineering career. I must have looked shocked because she smiled. "You've created something genuinely innovative, Mr. Morrison. You've combined traditional engineering expertise with modern technology in a way that most people in either field haven't thought to do. That has value." We negotiated for a few weeks. Robert helped me. I hired an intellectual property lawyer. By mid-June, we had a deal. On June 18th, I signed the contracts. The first payment hit my account the next day. It was real. It was happening. I still didn't tell anyone. Linda knew I'd been working on a project, but she thought it was just a hobby. The kids had their own lives. We talked on the phone every week or two, but the conversations remained superficial. In July, Urban Flow began implementing my system in Red Deer as a pilot project. Patricia kept me updated. The results were exceeding expectations. "We're getting interest from other cities," she told me over the phone. "Calgary's Transit Commission wants a presentation. Edmonton, too. We might have something even bigger than we thought." "That's good," I said. "Mr. Morrison, you should be more excited about this." "I am excited," I said. And I was. But there was also something hollow about it. I'd created something valuable, something meaningful, but I was experiencing it alone. August came. The family was planning a reunion at the cottage for Labor Day weekend. Linda mentioned it casually one evening. "You're invited this time," she said, as if that was some kind of generous gesture. "Good to know," I said. "James, don't be like that. The kids have been busy. You've been busy with your computer thing. It'll be nice to all be together." I almost told her then. Almost explained what my computer thing actually was. But I didn't. I wanted to see if any of them would ask. If anyone was curious about how I'd spent the past 8 months. Labor Day weekend arrived. I drove to Invermere alone. Linda had gone up a few days earlier. The cottage was on the shore of Lake Windermere, a beautiful spot we'd been visiting for 15 years. Everyone was there when I arrived. Daniel with his wife Jennifer and their 2 kids, Sarah with her partner Marcus, Michael with his girlfriend Emma. "Dad," Sarah hugged me. "It's been too long." "It has," I agreed. We fell into the usual patterns. Barbecue dinner, sitting on the deck watching the lake. The kids talking about their jobs, their lives. Nobody asked about mine. I was just there, present but peripheral. Opinionated James, who was tolerated but not particularly engaged with. On Sunday evening, we were all sitting around the fire pit. Michael was talking about his company's latest funding round. Daniel was giving him unsolicited advice about equity structures. "That's not how it works, Daniel," Michael said, a bit sharply. "I'm just trying to help," Daniel said. Well, maybe I don't need help with everything. The words hung in the air. I recognized them. I'd heard variations of them directed at me for the past year. Linda changed the subject quickly, talking about a renovation she wanted to do on the cottage. The moment passed, but I thought about it that night, lying in bed. Michael had snapped at Daniel for offering unsolicited advice. The same thing the kids had criticized me for. Maybe it wasn't about age. Maybe it was about respect, about how advice was delivered and received. Monday morning, we were packing up. I was loading my car when my phone rang. Unknown number. "James Morrison?" "Speaking. This is Ryan Chen from CBC News Calgary. We're doing a story on smart city initiatives, and your name came up in connection with the Red Deer traffic optimization project. Would you be available for an interview?" I glanced at my family, all busy with their own packing. "Can I call you back in an hour?" "Of course. I'll text you my direct line." I finished loading the car. We said our goodbyes. Linda was staying an extra day. I drove home alone, making calls. First to Robert. "CBC wants to interview me." "That's great." Patricia mentioned they might be reaching out. The Red Deer results have been exceptional. The city's seeing real improvements. Should I do it? Absolutely. This is good for everyone. For you, for urban flow, for the project. Next, I called Patricia. She echoed Robert's enthusiasm. "Mr. Morrison, this is wonderful publicity. We're in talks with Calgary and Edmonton now. National media attention will only help." I did the interview Tuesday afternoon. Wednesday morning, the story aired. It was a 3-minute segment on the morning news, talking about innovative traffic solutions and featuring my system prominently. They interviewed me, showed footage of the Red Deer implementation, included testimonials from city officials about reduced congestion. They mentioned my background as a retired civil engineer. They mentioned that I developed the system independently. They didn't mention the financial details, but they made it clear this was significant. Wednesday afternoon, my phone started ringing. First call was from Sarah. "Dad, what is this on the news?" "What news?" "CBC. You're on CBC talking about traffic systems and algorithms. Since when do you know about algorithms?" "I've been learning," I said. "Dad, they're saying your system is being implemented in cities, that it's revolutionary. What is going on?" "I've been working on a project." "I told you that." "You said you were learning Python. I thought you were just keeping yourself busy." Next call was from Daniel. "Dad, I just got a message from a colleague who saw you on the news. He says companies are competing to license your technology. Is that true?" "It's true," I said. "Why didn't you tell us?" Nobody asked. There was a long pause. "Dad, I have to go." "Daniel, talk later." Michael called next, then Linda, who was still at the cottage. Everyone had the same questions. Why didn't you tell us? How long has this been going on? Why were we the last to know? I didn't answer any of them in detail. I said I'd talk when everyone was home. Thursday evening, Linda arrived back at the house. She came in and just stood there, looking at me. "James." "Linda, the kids have been calling me all day. They're confused, hurt. They want to understand what's happening. What's happening is that I spent the past 9 months building something valuable, something that uses my expertise and experience in a new way, and nobody in this family noticed or cared until it was on television. That's not fair, isn't it? I set down the book I'd been reading. You told me I was too opinionated, that I should give everyone space. So I did. I gave you all space. And I worked. And I created something. And not once did any of you ask what I was actually doing. You never said it was anything serious. I shouldn't have had to. You're my wife. They're my children. Shouldn't someone have been curious? She sat down, looking stricken. I thought you were just coping with retirement, finding ways to fill time. By learning new skills? By applying my professional knowledge in innovative ways? Yes, that's exactly what I was doing. But apparently, that wasn't worth paying attention to. Friday morning, I woke up to an email from Patricia. Mr. Morrison, I wanted to give you advance notice. The Globe and Mail is running a feature on Sunday about smart city innovations. Your project is prominently featured. There's also interest from several American cities now, and I've had calls from 2 venture capital firms interested in scaling the technology globally. I read the email twice. This was getting bigger than I'd anticipated. Saturday, Daniel drove up from Edmonton. He knocked on the door mid-morning. Dad, can we talk? I let him in, made coffee. We sat at the kitchen table. I'm sorry, he said. For what? For not asking. For not being interested. You're right. We should have been curious about what you were doing. Yes, I said. You should have. I think, he paused. I think we got comfortable seeing you a certain way. Retired dad, saying his piece at dinner. We didn't see you as someone who was still building things, creating things. That's on you, I said. Not on me. I know. He looked down at his coffee. The thing is, Dad, you were kind of lecturing us. At Thanksgiving, at Christmas, you were giving us advice we didn't ask for. I was trying to help, but we didn't want that kind of help. We wanted you to just listen sometimes, ask questions, instead of providing answers. I considered this. You may have a point, but, Daniel continued, that doesn't excuse us not being curious about your life, about what you were working on. That's separate. And we were wrong. It was a good apology, specific, thoughtful. Thank you, I said. Will you tell me about it? The project? So I did. I spent 2 hours explaining how I developed the system, the engineering principles, the machine learning applications, the testing process. Daniel listened, asked intelligent questions, seemed genuinely interested. Dad, this is incredible. You created this from scratch? With help. Robert Fitzgerald connected me with the right people. Urban Flow provided development resources. But the core concept, the foundational work, that was mine. Do the others know about the financial aspect? They know something significant has happened. They don't know details. Sunday, the Globe and Mail article came out. It was even more prominent than I'd expected. Front page of the business section. A photo of me at my computer. Detailed explanation of the technology. Quotes from city officials, from Patricia, from urban planning experts, and it mentioned the licensing deal. Not specific numbers, but enough to make it clear this was financially significant. My phone exploded again. Sarah called. Dad, the article says you licensed the technology for a substantial sum. How substantial? Substantial enough, I said. Dad, Sarah, I don't need to discuss the financial details. What matters is that I created something valuable, that I'm still capable of contributing. Nobody said you weren't capable, didn't you? Wasn't that what opinionated meant? Wasn't that what give everyone space meant? That my input wasn't wanted? She was quiet for a moment. That's not what we meant. Maybe not. But that's what it felt like. Michael called that evening. Dad, I saw the article. I had no idea you were working on anything like this. This is the kind of innovation my whole company aspires to, and you did it from your kitchen table. I had time, I said. And motivation. What do you mean? I mean that when you're told you're too opinionated, that your presence makes people uncomfortable, you have 2 choices. You can shrink, or you can channel that energy into something productive. I chose the latter. Dad, I never wanted you to feel like you had to shrink, but you didn't want me at New Year's. Long pause. No, we didn't, and that was wrong. We hurt you, and I'm sorry. These apologies were good. They were sincere. But they didn't erase the past 9 months. They didn't change the fact that I'd gone through this significant period of growth and creation, essentially alone. Monday, Urban Flow announced they'd secured contracts with Calgary and Edmonton to implement the traffic optimization system. The announcement was paired with a press conference. Patricia asked if I wanted to attend. I did. The press conference was held at Calgary's City Hall. Patricia spoke, along with the mayor and the city's transportation director. Then they asked me to say a few words. I kept it brief. This system represents a combination of traditional civil engineering expertise and modern computational tools. It's proof that experience has value, that foundational knowledge can be applied in new ways, that innovation isn't the exclusive domain of the young. The reporters picked up on that theme. The questions afterward focused on age and innovation, on the value of experience, on lifelong learning. Mr. Morrison, what would you say to other retirees who feel they're past their productive years? I'd say that retirement is an opportunity, not an ending. It's a chance to apply decades of knowledge in new directions, to learn new skills, to create without the constraints of a traditional career structure. Age isn't a limitation. It's a resource. The press coverage that followed emphasized this angle. Retired engineer proves innovation has no age limit. 63-year-old creates revolutionary traffic system. Never too late. Calgary engineer's second act. The response was overwhelming. I received emails from people across Canada, retired professionals inspired by the story, young engineers interested in collaboration, cities asking about the technology, and I received calls from my children. All 3 of them asked to come over. We set a time for Wednesday evening. They arrived together. That was unusual. They sat in my living room, the 3 of them on the couch, me in my chair. Dad, Sarah spoke first. We need to talk about what happened. I'm listening, I said. We were wrong, she continued. About New Year's, about how we treated you, about not being interested in your life. You were, I said. Wrong, I mean. Daniel took over. We got caught up in our own stuff. Our careers, our relationships, our problems. We started seeing your input as interference instead of guidance. Sometimes it was interference, I said. I see that now. I was trying to stay relevant by offering solutions when maybe what you needed was just support. Maybe, Michael said. But we also dismissed you. We treated your experience as if it was obsolete, as if being retired meant you had nothing left to contribute, and that was incredibly unfair. Sarah leaned forward. Dad, when I saw you on TV, when I read those articles, I felt proud, but I also felt ashamed, because I realized I hadn't seen you, the real you, the person who was still growing and learning and creating. I saw retired Dad, and I stopped looking deeper. I appreciate that, I said. All of it. The apologies are meaningful. But, Daniel prompted, but apologies don't erase what happened. For 9 months, I worked on something significant. Something that challenged me intellectually and creatively, and I went through that entire process without support from my family, without interest from any of you. That loneliness, that hurt doesn't just disappear because of apologies. What can we do? Sarah asked. I don't know yet, I said honestly. I need time to figure that out. They left that evening without resolution. It wasn't satisfying for any of us, but it was honest. Linda and I talked that night. Are you going to forgive them? She asked. Eventually, I said. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending it didn't hurt. Are you going to forgive me? I looked at her. My wife of 37 years. The woman who'd told me to stay home because I was too opinionated. I don't know, I said. I'm working on it. She started crying. I held her. But I didn't take back what I'd said. The following weeks were complicated. Urban Flow was moving forward with implementations. I was consulting on the rollouts, participating in planning sessions, traveling to meet with city officials. The technology I'd created was becoming real, tangible, making actual differences in people's daily lives. In October, Patricia called with news. Mr. Morrison, I wanted you to hear this from me first. We've been approached by transportation departments in Seattle, Portland, and San Francisco. They want to implement the system. The American market is opening up. That's significant, I said. It is. It also means we need to discuss additional licensing terms. This is going to be bigger than anyone anticipated. We negotiated a new agreement, more favorable terms, greater royalty percentages. By the end of October, I'd secured financial arrangements that would sustain me comfortably for the rest of my life, with plenty left over. I still hadn't fully reconciled with my family. We talked, we saw each other, but there was a distance now that hadn't existed before, a wariness. In November, I decided to do something I'd been considering. I called each of my children and asked them to meet me for coffee. Individually, not as a group. I met with Sarah first, at a cafe in Calgary. "I want to tell you something," I said after we'd ordered, "about the past year." "Okay." "When you all told me I was too opinionated, that I shouldn't come to New Year's, I was devastated. I felt rejected, useless. Like my decades of experience and knowledge had no value anymore." She started to speak, but I held up a hand. "Let me finish. That pain, that rejection, it became fuel. It pushed me to prove something. To myself, mostly, but maybe to all of you too. And I did prove it. I created something valuable. But here's what I've learned. I didn't do it to show you. I did it because I needed to show myself that I still mattered, that I still had something to contribute. The recognition, the money, the success, those are all good. But what mattered most was proving to myself that I wasn't finished. Dad, the thing is, Sarah, I don't need your validation anymore. Not the way I used to. That's not a criticism. It's just a fact. I've learned that my value doesn't depend on whether my children recognize it, and that's liberating. But it's also sad, because I wish I'd learned that lesson in a less painful way. Tears were running down her face. "I'm so sorry. I know. And I forgive you. But our relationship is different now, and it's going to take time to rebuild what was broken." I had similar conversations with Daniel and Michael. Each one was difficult. Each one was necessary. By late November, something began to shift. The kids started calling more often, not just surface conversations. They asked about the project, about my work, about my life. They listened when I talked. They seemed genuinely interested. Linda and I went to counseling. A therapist helped us navigate what had happened, helped her understand the depth of the hurt, helped me understand her perspective too, that she'd been caught between her husband and her children, trying to keep peace. "I failed you," she said in one session. "I should have defended you, should have told them they were wrong to exclude you." "Yes," I said. "You should have. I was afraid of conflict, afraid of upsetting them. You chose them over me." "I did, and I was wrong. It took months, but we began to heal, to rebuild." December arrived. The family asked if I wanted to come to the cottage for New Year's. "Are you asking because you want me there, or because you feel obligated?" I asked Daniel on the phone. "We want you there, Dad. Really. Things are different now." "How are they different?" "We see you differently. We respect what you've accomplished. Not just the traffic system, but how you handled everything. How you didn't give up. How you proved all of us wrong." "I didn't do it to prove you wrong." "I know. That makes it even more impressive." I thought about it for a few days. Talked to Linda. Talked to my therapist. "What do you want to do?" the therapist asked. "I want to go, but I'm afraid it'll feel like I'm condoning what happened, like I'm saying it was okay." "You can go and still maintain your boundaries. You can participate and still remember what you learned." So I went to the cottage for New Year's Eve. The whole family was there. It was different. The kids asked about my work. They listened when I talked. They engaged with me as an equal, not as an old man spouting opinions. At midnight, we stood on the deck watching fireworks over the lake. Daniel put his arm around my shoulders. "To new beginnings," he said. "To new beginnings," I echoed. "But here's what I want you to understand. What happened to me, what I learned, it's not really about family reconciliation. That's part of it, sure. But the deeper truth is this. Your value doesn't depend on other people recognizing it. Your worth isn't determined by whether your children respect you, whether your spouse defends you, whether your family appreciates you. Those things are nice. They matter. But they're not the source of your value." I spent a year being dismissed, being told I was too much, too opinionated, too difficult. And I could have internalized that, could have become smaller, could have accepted their assessment and faded into the background. Instead, I chose to prove something to myself, not to them, to myself. I chose to take my knowledge, my experience, my expertise, and channel it into creation, into innovation, into something that made a real difference. And yes, eventually my family recognized what I'd done. Eventually they apologized. Eventually we reconciled. But by that point, I didn't need their recognition to feel valuable. I'd already proven my worth to the person who mattered most, myself. If you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, and you feel dismissed by the people around you, hear this: you are not finished. Your experience has value. Your knowledge matters. Your ability to learn and grow and create doesn't expire with retirement. But you have to believe that for yourself. You can't wait for others to see it first. You can't outsource your sense of worth to your children or your spouse or your former colleagues. You have to claim it, own it, act on it. I didn't build a traffic optimization system because I wanted to prove my family wrong. I built it because I knew I had something to contribute. Because I believed my decades of experience in civil engineering could be combined with new technology to solve real problems. Because I refused to accept that retirement meant irrelevance. The money was nice. The recognition was gratifying. The family reconciliation was healing. But none of that compares to the feeling of sitting at my computer at 2 a.m, solving a complex problem, knowing that I was still capable, still growing, still creating. That's what I want you to take from this. Not that you should wait for tragedy to motivate you. Not that you need to create something revolutionary, but that you should refuse to accept other people's limited vision of who you are and what you're capable of. Learn something new. Apply your experience in novel ways. Create something that matters to you, not because you need to prove anything to anyone, but because you deserve to continue growing, developing, contributing for as long as you live. Age brings limitations, yes. Physical ones, certainly. But intellectual creativity, the ability to combine knowledge in new ways, the capacity for innovation, those don't have an expiration date. My family learned to see me differently, but more importantly, I learned to see myself differently. Not as a retired engineer filling time with hobbies, but as a professional who'd entered a new phase of creative work, unburdened by the constraints of employment, free to pursue interesting problems purely because they were interesting. That shift in self-perception, that's what changed everything. So if you're feeling dismissed, overlooked, considered too opinionated, or too much, or too difficult, consider this. Maybe they're not seeing clearly. Maybe their vision is clouded by assumptions about age, about retirement, about what's possible. You don't have to accept their vision. You can create your own. I did, and it changed my life. Not just externally, with the success and recognition and financial security, but internally. It changed how I see myself, how I move through the world, how I approach each day. I'm 64 now. I'm still consulting on traffic system implementations across North America. Still learning, still growing, still creating, and yes, my family is back in my life. We've rebuilt our relationships on a foundation of mutual respect, but that respect isn't why I feel valuable. It's a reflection of the value I claimed for myself. That's the lesson. That's what matters. Your worth is inherent. Your potential is ongoing. Your story isn't finished. Act like it.